Imagine walking onto a stage,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You're in a packed auditorium in Santa Monica, and it is 1971.
So a pretty volatile time.
Oh, completely.
Right.
But the crowd, they paid to see you. They are eagerly anticipating your profound wisdom.
Right.
And as you step up to the microphone, the very first thing you do is look out at them, and will you tell them to stop clapping?
Because, as he says, it is a complete waste of energy.
Yeah.
And he actually follows it up by dryly suggesting that if they really feel the overwhelming urge to clap, they should probably do it when he's not in the room.
It's such a brilliantly disarming way to start a public talk.
It really is.
You're immediately telling the audience that you are throwing out the established social contract today.
Yeah.
Like, there will be no performing, and there will be no polite audience rituals.
No pandering at all.
Exactly. And I think that sets the stage perfectly for the mission of today's deep dive into the source material. We're unpacking a transcript from that exact public talk by the thinker J. Krishnamurti.
A truly fascinating figure.
Absolutely. And what we are exploring today is his, frankly, radical proposition that the world's immense confusion, all of its violence and its misery, absolutely cannot be solved by any new external systems.
Right. Which goes against almost everything we're taught.
It does. He argues the only way out is through a total inward psychological revolution.
Which, I mean, that is a massive claim to make, especially when you look at the historical backdrop of this talk.
Yeah, paint that picture for us.
Well, the early 70s were entirely defined by things like the Vietnam War, massive global protests, the Cold War.
Tensions in the Middle East, too.
Exactly. People were desperate for a new system. They were out in the streets protesting for new governments, new policies, totally new social structures.
Because they felt the current ones were failing them.
Right. And Krishnamurti looks at all of this, all these fragmented divisions in religion, in politics, and sociology, and he observes that human beings are just getting caught in these vast, grinding machines.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because he specifically calls out the major isms that people were putting all their faith in at the time.
He does.
Things like communism, socialism, capitalism.
And we should look at his argument neutrally here, just focusing on the mechanics of his logic,
Right, absolutely.
He argues that no external organization, no new bureaucracy, and no physical revolution is ever going to solve the fundamental human problem.
None of it.
None of it. He brings up the Russian Revolution as a historical case study.
Well, that's a great example.
Yeah, he points out that when you attempt a physical external revolution without fundamentally changing the human mind first, the people who seize power still have the exact same psychological makeup as the oppressors they just overthrew.
So they are still driven by greed or competition or fear.
Exactly. So the inevitable result is just a more brutal bureaucracy.
Wow.
You just get greater tyranny under a new flag. The system changes, but the human mind running the system remains utterly self-centered and violent.
That makes me think about how we try to solve problems even today, like in our own lives.
How so?
Well, it feels a bit like, imagine you have a laptop that is deeply infected with malware.
Okay, I've been there.
Right. The software is glitching, it's crashing all the time, it's completely ruining all your files. And your grand solution to fix this total chaos is to go out and buy a shiny new aluminum case and a really fast mechanical keyboard.
Oh, right. You're upgrading the hardware while completely ignoring the code?
Yeah. The external setup looks fantastic now. It feels totally new.
But you haven't touched the corrupted operating system at all.
Exactly. So all you've actually accomplished is giving that exact same destructive malware a more efficient environment to run in. The outside changed, but the inside, the thing actually driving the behavior, is identical.
I love that analogy because it gets right to the core of one of his most profound beliefs.
Which is,
if we connect this to the bigger picture, he explicitly states that we are the world and the world is ours.
we are the world.
Right. And he insists this is not just some poetic metaphor. It is a literal, observable fact.
How does he mean that literally?
Well, the society we live in is nothing more than the outward projection of our inward psychological state.
Oh, I see.
Our daily actions, our personal ambitions, our individual cruelties, those are the literal building blocks of the world's structure.
So the malware is us.
Precisely. Therefore, trying to change the outer environment without first changing the inner self is biologically and psychologically impossible. They are one unitary movement.
But, okay, if that is a fact, if the outer systems are just new hardware for a corrupted operating system, why do we keep obsessively building them?
That's the big question.
Right. Why are we always so desperate for the next political party or the next economic theory or some new religious organization to come save us?
It really comes down to the brain's fundamental biological demand for security.
Security. Okay.
Yeah, Krishnamurti points out that the human brain requires security just to function. It needs to operate without constant chaotic disturbance to survive.
That makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Exactly. And historically, the primary mechanism we've used to establish that security is division. We divide ourselves up into highly categorized groups to create a manageable, predictable environment.
So we find safety in a label, like a tribe.
Right. We find security in being an American or an English person. We find security in identifying as a Catholic or a Protestant or a Marxist.
Just putting ourselves in a neat little box.
He even points out that people can find a bizarre kind of security in being part of the drug culture or even in their own neuroticism.
Wait, really? Their own neuroticism?
Yeah, because at least it's known territory. It gives the brain a center from which it feels safe to operate.
Okay, but the problem with that center is what? Exactly. Like, if it keeps the brain calm, why is it so destructive?
Because when you observe the world from this fortified center, this structure built entirely out of your prejudices, your cultural conditioning, and your past conclusions, you inherently create a deep division between yourself and everything else. You're constantly judging reality based on whether it threatens or validates your center.
Oh, and wherever there is division, there is inevitably going to be conflict.
Always.
Like, if I'm sitting in my ideological fortress and you are sitting in yours, and resources get scarce or our beliefs clash, eventually we are going to start throwing rocks at each other.
What's fascinating here is how he highlights this tragedy by looking at the very word individual.
The word individual.
Yeah, the root of the word literally means undivided or indivisible.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Right. It implies a human being who is a total integrated unity. Yet, human beings today are the exact opposite of that.
We are so divided.
We are totally fragmented, broken up into competing identities, living in constant contradiction, both within ourselves and with the world around us. So we're not actual individuals at all.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because I think a lot of people listening might feel this way too. Isn't finding a community or a shared identity a completely natural human need?
It definitely feels natural.
Right. I mean, we are social primates. I look at this need for a center or an identity, like a turtle's shell.
The turtle shell. Okay.
Yeah, yes, it's a rigid barrier. But it keeps you safe from predators.
Yeah.
It protects your softest, most vulnerable parts.
That's true.
The trade-off is that it isolates you. And sure, it's pretty dark inside. But how can we possibly survive in a chaotic world if we just step completely outside of our protective center?
Well, Krishnamurti would likely acknowledge that the shell provides the illusion of safety.
The illusion.
Right. But he questions the actual quality of the life you're living while hiding inside it. Like, are you actually living, or are you just perpetually defending your borders?
Oh, that's a good point.
His argument is that to step outside that shell requires an entirely different mechanism of engaging with reality. You cannot just drop the shell and keep functioning the way you always have.
So what do you do instead?
You need a totally new way of observing and listening.
But the human brain is literally a prediction engine, right? We use past data and past experiences to survive the present moment. If I don't use my past knowledge, how do I even function? How do you look at something without your past?
He breaks down the difference between observing an image of a thing and true observation of the thing itself.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's take the example he uses in the talk, looking at a brilliant sunset.
Okay, sunset.
If you look at that sunset through the lens of all your past memories of sunsets, or you immediately start naming the colors, or, I don't know, analyzing the light refraction based on your scientific knowledge.
Yeah, I do that sometimes.
Right, we all do. But he says if you do that, you aren't actually looking at that specific sunset in the present moment. You're just observing your own internal, accumulated image of a sunset.
Because I've already categorized it.
Exactly. True observation, he says, is entirely nonverbal. It happens without judging, without condemning, and without instantly translating what you see to fit into your pre-existing center.
But if you apply that to human relationships, it gets pretty stark.
Oh, definitely.
Like if I'm looking at my spouse or my kid or a politician I disagree with, and I'm only seeing the accumulated memories of everything they've ever done to annoy me or please me,
Yeah.
I'm not actually interacting with the living person in front of me.
You are interacting with a ghost. You're interacting with an image your brain created to save time and cognitive energy.
Wow.
We don't truly listen to people. We are just constantly interpreting their words through the filter of our own pleasure, our own pain, and our own biases.
That distinction changes how we understand independence entirely.
This raises an important question. It really does. Krishnamurti draws a very sharp line between independence and freedom.
Okay, what's the difference?
In his view, independence is merely a reaction. If you aggressively break away from your family's ideology, or you rebel against a specific political system just to be independent, you almost always end up immediately depending on something else.
Right, you join a counterculture or a new political faction.
Exactly. It's just another form of dependency. True freedom has absolutely no dependency.
So what is it then?
It is the state of mind that can just observe reality exactly as it is without needing an ideological shell to feel secure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because how does this work in practice?
Right.
His critique gets really grounded here because he brings up American culture at the time. He mentions that colleges were starting to offer courses in sensitivity training.
Which he views as a complete contradiction in terms.
It is totally absurd when you think about it through his framework.
How so?
Well, you think you can just pay tuition, go sit in a lecture hall, listen to a professor who probably has their own massive center and prejudices.
Almost certainly.
Right. And somehow you're going to acquire sensitivity. It's like trying to learn how to taste a masterfully cooked meal by reading the restaurant menu over and over again.
Oh, I like that. Reading the menu instead of eating the food.
Yeah, you're getting a superficial intellectual imitation of a real experience.
Yeah.
You cannot put true listening on a syllabus and grade it.
Because true sensitivity implies an attention where me, the ego, the center, is totally abandoned.
Which you can't teach.
Right. If you're sitting in a class trying to achieve sensitivity so you can be a better person, your ego is entirely in the driver's seat. You're just trying to grab another merit badge for your identity.
Okay, but if I actually try to do what he is suggesting,
Yeah.
if I say, okay, I'm going to observe the world today without any prejudice, without my center, without my turtle shell, I'm going to step out into the world naked, psychologically speaking.
The brave choice.
What inevitably happens is I'm going to feel completely, overwhelmingly confused. The world is incredibly complex, and without my labels to sort it out, I'm just going to be paralyzed.
And this is where his logic takes a fascinating turn into the anatomy of a confused mind.
Okay.
He observes that a mind that is confused feels an overwhelming, desperate compulsion to choose. When you feel paralyzed, your brain screams, "What should I do? Which road should I take? Which leader should I follow to get out of this?"
Because society tells us that when you are confused, you need to make a plan. You need to take action to resolve the confusion.
But Krishnamurti argues that is the worst thing you could possibly do.
Wait, really?
A clear mind, he says, has no choice. A clear mind simply sees the truth of a situation and acts directly.
Oh, I see.
Therefore, any action that is born out of a state of confusion is only going to breed more confusion.
Because it's tainted by the confusion.
Exactly. If you're deeply confused about your life and you pick a new career or a new philosophy or a new partner just to escape the agonizing feeling of confusion, you've just locked yourself into a brand new layer of chaos.
So what is his solution?
Stop. Do absolutely nothing. Do not act out of confusion.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's ground this in an analogy, because the idea of doing nothing when you are in crisis sounds terrifying.
It feels counterintuitive.
It sounds like giving up. But imagine you are hiking, right?
Yeah.
And you suddenly realize you are completely lost in a dense forest.
Panic sets in.
Exactly. Your immediate panicked instinct, the action born of confusion, is to just start sprinting in any random direction, hoping you hit a road or a familiar landmark.
Which usually just drives you deeper into the wilderness.
Exactly. You get more lost,
Yeah.
you burn energy, you panic more, the situation gets worse. The absolute best, most strategic thing you can do to find clarity when you realize you are lost is to force yourself to stand completely still.
Just stop.
Stop moving. Look at the sun. Listen to the environment.
That requires you to actually face the reality of being lost, rather than running from it. And he makes a crucial distinction here with the audience.
What's that?
He challenges them to understand the difference between having an idea that you are confused versus the actual fact of being confused.
What is the mechanical difference there?
Consider the difference between someone explaining the biological concept of starvation to you versus actually feeling the sharp, painful pangs of hunger in your own stomach.
Oh, wow. Yeah, totally different.
We love the idea of our problems because we can endlessly analyze them. We can say, oh yes, intellectually I agree, the world is confusing, let's discuss it over coffee.
Yeah.
But if you deeply, viscerally feel the total fact of your confusion without trying to analyze it or escape it, your entire psychological structure stops. You stand completely still in the woods.
Standing perfectly still in the woods, just observing reality without reacting, without bringing your past into it.
Yeah,
That sounds an awful lot like what people call meditation.
it does.
Did he get into the meditation craze that was happening at the time? Because the early 70s were huge for that.
Oh, he did. And it led to one of the most electric, tense exchanges in the entire source material during the Q&A segment.
Ooh, tell me about that.
So a man steps up to the microphone and identifies himself as a teacher of transcendental meditation,
Okay.
specifically as taught by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Which, just for context for you listening, that was a massive cultural phenomenon at the time.
Huge.
The Beatles had gone to India, TM was exploding in Western culture, and it was being packaged as a very accessible, systematic way to achieve enlightenment.
It was incredibly seductive. And this teacher asks a multi-part question. He wants to know about Krishnamurti's success rate over his 40 years of speaking.
Like it's a business.
Right. He talks about how his own TM students naturally develop the exact qualities Krishnamurti is talking about. And then he brings up the ultimate goal of their practice, evolving toward cosmic consciousness, a state of being totally in tune with the universe.
And Krishnamurti vehemently rejects the entire premise, doesn't he?
Completely. He doesn't even entertain the question on its own terms.
What does he say?
He cuts straight to the foundational flaw he sees in the movement. He tells the man, you cannot teach meditation. The very concept is an impossibility. He equates it to teaching someone how to love. You might be able to teach someone the mechanics of seeking pleasure, but you cannot give someone a 10-step syllabus on how to truly love another human being. It has to arise spontaneously.
And he really hones in on the word practice, right?
He does.
The TM teacher mentions the practice his students do, and Krishnamurti just tears that concept apart.
Yeah, he argues that if you are practicing something, you are engaging in repetition.
Right, you're doing the same technique, repeating the same mantra day after day.
And repetition becomes mechanical.
Yeah.
And a mind that has been made mechanical, a mind that operates like a machine on a strict schedule, can never possibly understand the spontaneous living beauty of true meditation.
You can imagine the tension in that room.
Oh, you could cut it with a knife.
Right.
You have an audience full of seekers who have come looking for answers, looking for a guru, looking for a reliable method to feel better.
Right.
And Krishnamurti absolutely insists that there are no gurus, there are no guides, and there is no authority whatsoever in the psychological realm. He refuses to give them a comforting step-by-step checklist.
Because we all want the checklist.
We do.
We love a system. If I want to learn to paint, part of me just wants someone to give me a canvas with the numbers on it and tell me exactly which colors to fill in the lines.
Right. Paint by numbers.
Exactly. What he's saying is that mechanical meditation is exactly like painting by numbers. Sure, when you are done, technically, it looks like a painting of a landscape. You followed all the instructions.
But it isn't true spontaneous art.
No, it's just a superficial imitation.
The irony is he grounds this deeply philosophical point in something surprisingly practical.
Makes that.
He tells the audience that before you even attempt to understand what meditation is, you must first lay a foundation of righteous, orderly living.
Orderly living.
Yes!
Yeah.
Not as an intellectual, moral principle, but by actually looking at how disorderly, contradictory, and confused your daily life is.
Right.
If your daily relationships are a chaotic mess of conflict, jealousy, and self-centeredness, sitting in a quiet room for 20 minutes a day repeating a word is, in his view, merely a form of self-indulgence. It is an escape, not a solution.
Man. So, synthesizing all of these sources and arguments, the core journey of this deep dive really demands a pretty massive paradigm shift.
It absolutely does.
We have to recognize that true change, the kind that actually ends human misery and violence, is never going to come from an external revolution.
Right.
Joining a new political faction or adopting a new economic theory is just putting a shiny new case on a corrupted hard drive.
The underlying code of human brutality remains untouched.
The only viable path forward is an inward psychological revolution.
And that requires immense courage.
It really does.
It requires abandoning the center, that protective turtle shell of our prejudices, our nationalities, and our deeply held beliefs. It means facing the world without the filter of our past.
It requires us to deeply understand that when we feel confused, the absolute worst thing we can do is make a frantic choice just to relieve the pressure.
Because acting out of confusion only breeds more chaos.
We have to learn to stand perfectly still in the woods.
Exactly.
And finally, we have to reject the comforting paint-by-numbers paths to enlightenment that tell us we can simply purchase a mantra and mechanically practice our way to cosmic consciousness.
It is a relentlessly demanding philosophy,
It is.
but it's also deeply empowering because it places the ultimate responsibility entirely back on you. There is no authority coming to save you, but there is also no authority holding you back from immediate, total freedom.
Which brings us to a challenge for you, the listener, to try applying this tomorrow.
There's a homework.
Yeah, try a very simple but incredibly difficult experiment. When you are talking to a friend or your child or a colleague tomorrow, try to just listen.
Just listen.
Practice pure, centerless observation. Try to hear their words without instantly interpreting them through your own past experiences with them.
And without formulating your brilliant counterargument in your head while they are still speaking.
Yes, that's the hardest part. Just observe the living person in front of you without the image you have built of them.
You will likely find your brain fighting you every step of the way. It might be the hardest thing you do all day.
Truly.
But you might also experience a brief moment of true, undivided connection.
And we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, building on everything we have unpacked today.
Okay.
If Krishnamurti is right, if the statement, "we are the world and the world is us," is not just a nice piece of poetry, but a literal, biological, and psychological fact,
Yeah.
then every time we retreat into our turtle shell, every time we aggressively divide ourselves from others with labels and ideologies just to feel a fleeting sense of security, are we actually just declaring war on a piece of ourselves?
A profoundly disturbing and necessary question to sit with.
We will leave you to stand still in the woods with that one. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.